This is one of my favourite films of the year so far, so I really do want you to see it and I want you to love it as much as I did. But there are quite a few violent scenes in the film, and of course, I want to make you aware of what they are before you go in. One of the first things I want to talk to you about is in terms of cultural sensitivity. Now, the film opens on the photographs. They're quite beautiful photographs, actually, of early colonial Australia. And in these pictures, you start very clearly to get a sense of how poorly our Indigenous Australians and our Chinese immigrants were treated. So, while you don't actually see any violent images, you very much and very clearly get the sense of superiority over these people. Also, as part of Aboriginal culture, it can be upsetting to see images of deceased Aboriginal people, and of course, being colonial era photographs, these people would be long dead. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. So sticking on that same kind of theme, there is an Aboriginal character, an Indigenous character in the film who dies in the film. So, and then you see this person's body laid out being examined. So again, an image of a deceased person, even though I guess it is in a film. There's quite a few suicide references in the film. There is one suicide which is seen. You don't actually see it happen, but you see the aftermath. You see someone hanging. And then there's a lot of discussion around this. There's also quite a bit of discussion around the idea of suicide, particularly with Aboriginal Indigenous youths. And there's quite a bit of discussion about how they don't get much of a chance in life and they end up killing themselves. So this is a fairly kind of concurrent theme through the film, recurrent theme. Other scenes of violence, there's quite a bit of shooting in the film. The climax of the film is actually a big shootout, which is quite impressively staged. There's a lot of gunfire in this scene. This is probably the only scene where you really see any blood. One particular death happens against a wall, so you see blood spatter spray against the wall. You also see kind of the bloody bullet wounds and some bloodied clothing. That's probably the most shooting, but there are a few other shooting scenes as well. In these other scenes, vehicles are shot or shot at, and there is one kind of, again, theme-heavy scene where a character is kind of forced to dig their own grave, and they're held at gunpoint, and this results in a shooting scene as well. Other scenes of blood and gore, you'd see a decayed, very decomposed skeleton lying on the ground. And there's a scene where people are driving along and you don't actually see it happen, but a bird is said to have been hit by the car, and you don't see it happen, but then you see some feathers and so forth on the windscreen. So that's a little bit unpleasant as well. So moving on to the sex and nudity. This is a very strong theme in the film. Not nudity so much. There isn't really any nudity in the film, but there's some very skimpy clothing and lingerie and very skimpily dressed females. But the sex is a theme because it's about prostitution and human trafficking, particularly for sex. The theme is also paying for sex. So while you don't actually see anybody having sex, you do see scenes that occur right beforehand and immediately afterwards. So you know exactly what is taking place or what has taken place. And prostitution and some of the film is set in a brothel. So the whole theme is very, it focuses on the kind of activity which is happening in these places. It does touch on the sordidness of it as well, and the inappropriateness of it, particularly when you understand why it's happening and who these people are. So, there might be a bit of controversy there, particularly if, depending on how you feel about prostitution, for example. So, as I said, there's nothing graphic, there's nothing explicit. I think the most you actually see happen between two people is kissing, but you very much get the clear idea of the sordid side of the sex trade, which is presented in this film. Language, there is a bit of offensive language in the film. F words, S words and A words are all used, and there's a few other kind of like name calling and things like that. F word is used quite frequently during the film. The only other thing is the alcohol and drugs. Alcohol, there is quite a bit of alcohol in the film, mostly beer. There is one character in particular who drinks a lot of beer, and there's a character who's arrested for DUI, and there's one scene where some men are brawling, and clearly they're all intoxicated, and they end up sleeping it off in the watch house. So alcohol does play a theme in the film as well. Drugs, there's no actually drugs in the film. I think there's one mention of trying to get kids off drugs, but that's it. There's no gambling in the film either. So for me, this film is Australian filmmaking at its best. There are so many reasons I loved it, not least because of the absolutely breathtaking, stunning landscapes. The cinematography is just superb. And also the way it captures its setting, the way it captures a part of our Australian identity, particularly in terms of our white and Indigenous relationships. So many things are mentioned or touched on in this film, yet it's not at all heavy-handed. So stuff like the stolen children is mentioned. It's important enough to get a mention, but it doesn't go into detail. If you want to know more about it, you can look it up. So I just love the way it's kind of, everything is as a matter of fact, this is just how it is, rather than trying to be some kind of political controversy or anything like that. It's very, very clever. I really would love you to go and see this film. I'd love to know what you think of it. There's a more detailed breakdown on the website. Critics are raving about this film, so if you want to know what the critics like and critics don't like, well, I haven't really found much in that category yet, then please have a look at cinemum.net.